Hey guys, what's up? Hope you all are doing well. Welcome to another new video of AWS series. Today I'll build a serverless application from scratch using AWS Lambda, API Gateway and DynamoDB. So please watch till the end of this video. And if you are new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe my channel. So without wasting much time, let's get started guys. So today we'll create a CRUD API using API Gateway, Lambda and DynamoDB in Java. So for this you must aware of API Gateway, Lambda and DynamoDB. If you don't know, then don't worry, I'll share everything in this video from the scratch. So this is the diagram, okay? AWS Lambda CRUD REST API. So how it works actually? So let's say a client send a request. HTTP post, get, put or delete request, any request. Whenever a client send a request, our API gateway will be invoked. So in the API gateway, we will configure all the REST endpoints. So API gateway will trigger this Lambda. So in this Lambda, in the Lambda function, we will add a trigger as API gateway. So you know, in my previous video, I have already shared how we can add API gateway as a trigger in the Lambda function. So when this Lambda will be invoked, inside this Lambda we'll write certain piece of code to save the data to our DynamoDB or to fetch the data or to delete the data. Okay. So that is the flow. So when the client hit a request, that will reach to API gateway, then this API gateway invoke this Lambda function. So inside this Lambda function, whatever code is there, it will be executed and then it will be communicated with the DynamoDB according to the request. Clear so far? So for this, what we need to do? We need to create DynamoDB table, create a Lambda function, then we'll create certain IAM rule and assign to this Lambda function so that this Lambda will communicate with the API gateway, okay, and the DynamoDB. Correct? Then we create a API gateway of course. Then we'll write the CRUD API in Java and deploy that jar to our AWS Lambda function. Then we'll test all the REST endpoints through our postman, okay, which is a REST client. You can use any of the REST client to test your endpoints. And then we'll delete all the results whatever we have created, okay. So then for this, let me go to my browser and open AWS Management Console. As you see, I have already signed into my AWS Management Console, okay. You can sign into your AWS Management Console. And let's hit in the services, okay. You can search for DynamoDB first. So first we need to create a DynamoDB table, okay. So let's quickly create a DynamoDB table. So here you can click here to create your table. So here I am giving my table name like employee. So I'll create a REST endpoints, okay, to save the data, employee data to DynamoDB table, fetch employee by employee ID from the DynamoDB and to fetch all the employee list and to delete a particular employee object, okay. So that's why I'm giving the employee name here as employee. So you can give your table name according to your requirement. Then partition key, which is nothing but your primary key. So let me provide the primary key as employee ID here. So this is the primary key of my employee table. Then I am selecting the string, okay. The data type of this employee ID is string. Then cert key, which is optional, you can provide or you may not provide. So for this example, I am not providing any cert key. So then everything will be as is. Then create here to create your DynamoDB table. So click here. So it will take some time. Please wait. So meanwhile, let me go to Lambda function. After creating DynamoDB table, you need to create a Lambda function. Then let me go to the Lambda, search here Lambda. I'll create a Lambda function. Click here to go to the Lambda. Okay, so this is my Lambda console. So here you can create here to create your Lambda function. So we'll go with the author from scratch, okay. We'll create the Lambda function from the scratch. As I mentioned, if you don't know how to create a Lambda function or DynamoDB or API gateway, I'll show everything from the scratch. So here our DynamoDB table is created successfully. You can see the employee table is created successfully, where the partition key or primary key is employee ID, which is string data type. Okay, then we'll add other items to this table. Later I'll show you how we can add this. Then we'll create the Lambda function from the scratch. So let me give my function name like REST API Lambda. Okay, you can give any name. Then I'll choose the runtime Java. Okay, then click here, change default execution role. So here I'll provide the role. So here you can see there are three options: create a new role with basic Lambda permission, use an existing role, create a new role from AWS policy template. So I'll go with create a new role with basic Lambda permission. So for this, if you are creating a new role, then you need to go to IAM console of AWS. So here you can see to create a custom role, go to the IAM console. So let me open the IAM console to create the role and assign it to this Lambda. So let it open, then let me, okay, so it is open, fine. We'll go to the API Gateway console later. So here AWS services, I'll create the IAM role for which services? I'll create the IAM role for the Lambda. So then from this bucket I'll choose Lambda. So create this one, Lambda, then click here, next permission, then search here. Okay, so I am going to connect this Lambda function with Amazon DynamoDB. So I need to give the permission to this Lambda to communicate with DynamoDB. So let me search for AWS. Just search for DynamoDB. Here, see here. So Amazon DynamoDB full access is there. Amazon DynamoDB read-only access is there, and these actions are available. So I can give Amazon DynamoDB full access. So I can select this one. Okay. Now I need another permission, which is AWS Lambda basic execution role. Okay, so let me search for Lambda. So here, let me scroll down. Yeah, here AWS Lambda basic execution role. So I can select this role as well. I need these two role for my Lambda. So you can select here next. So I don't want to provide any key value, so it is optional. You can keep it as is. So next, review. Okay, so role name you have to provide. So I am giving CRUD API role. Okay, you can give your role name. So role name I have given. Then these are the two policies: Amazon DynamoDB full access, AWS Lambda basic execution role. So these two policies we have provided to this role name. Okay, then click here to create a role. Okay, so if I click on the roles, then you can see your CRUD API role is created over here. Okay, so now let me go back to the Lambda console again and click here to use an existing role. We have already created the role. Okay, I can click here to use an existing role. Okay, then if I select this one, you can see there are so many roles available. I'll select this CRUD API role, which we are created just now. Okay, so CRUD API role. So advanced setting, I don't want any advanced setting for my Lambda. So then click here to create your function. Okay, so now my REST API Lambda is ready. So what next? Let me go to my PPT again. So we have created the DynamoDB table. We have created the Lambda function. Also we create the IAM role for this Lambda function and assign to this Lambda. So now we'll create our API gateway. So let me go to the browser again. Then let me duplicate this one. Here in the services section, I'll search for API gateway. Okay, API gateway. You can find all the AWS services in the services section. Just search here. So here you can see API gateway is there. Just click this one. Okay, so now I'll create a API gateway from scratch. So remember in which region you are creating your DynamoDB and Lambda, you need to create your API gateway also in that region, particular region. So here we have the region Mumbai for Lambda, and in DynamoDB is also in Mumbai region, which is nothing but your Asia Pacific, Mumbai. Okay. So I'll create the API gateway also in this region. So let me select Asia Pacific, Mumbai. Okay. So now we are in the Amazon API Gateway console. So now I can click here. So we will create a REST API. So I can click this option. Okay. So if you are creating a WebSocket API or HTTP API, you can follow this one. So I'll create a REST API. That's why I'm choosing this one. So click here build. Okay. Get your first API. Click here OK. Then we'll create the REST API. The protocol is REST, okay, and create a new API. So we'll create a new API from the scratch. So please select this option. So if I click on the example API, you can see this is an example API. Okay. So also you can import from Swagger or OpenAPI 3. So I'll create from the scratch. So I'll go with this option, new API. So here you can provide your API name. So I'll provide like employee API, as I am going to create a employee CRUD API. So description you can provide like CRUD API for employee. Okay. And endpoint just keep it regional. Then click here to create your API. Okay. Click here to create API. Cool. So this is the employee API created. So this is the ID. So now we are in the API gateway resources. Okay. So here you can see the root path is /. So now I'll create my resources. Like to save a employee, I have the /employee endpoint. To fetch employee by ID, I have employee/ID. Then to fetch all the employee list, I have /employees is there. Okay. And to delete a particular employee, I have the employee endpoint is there. Okay. I'll create all the resources here. So how I can create? Just mark. So here you can see the action button is there. Okay. So I'll select this action and I'll create resource here. So here you have to provide your resource name. So my resource name is, let's say, employee. Okay. So this one is your /employee. So this is your resource name, employee, and your endpoint name is /employee. So that's why the resource path is /employee. Understood? Then I'll enable the API gateway cards here. Select this one and click here to create your first resource. Okay. So see, employee endpoint /employee endpoint is created. So now I'll select this /employee endpoint and create a HTTP method. So you know to save a employee, I have the post method. So I'll click here, then again click in the action, then create method. Okay. So now I'll select this one, then post. Okay, HTTP method is post. Then I'll click here, right tick. So here the integration type is Lambda function. So here use Lambda proxy integration. So I'll go with this option, use Lambda proxy integration. So just select this one. If you see here, request will be proxy to Lambda with request details available in the event of your handler function. So whatever event present in your AWS Lambda handler function, the request will be comes to proxy. So it will be easy to read the request. Okay. So use Lambda proxy integration. So I'll go with this one. Then Lambda region your is AP South 1, which is nothing but Mumbai region. Then Lambda function. So your Lambda function, just now we created this Lambda, REST API Lambda. So we'll feed this one to this API gateway. So whenever a client request /employee comes to this API gateway, this Lambda will be, REST API Lambda will be invoked. Okay. So we need to add this as a trigger here. So just search REST, you can see REST API Lambda is here. So select this one. Then we'll go with the default timeout. You know default timeout is 29,000 milliseconds, that is 29 seconds. Okay. So click here to save your first HTTP method, that is post. Okay, to save a employee. So click here to save. Okay, so now our request is created successfully /employee. So what else? Now we'll create another resource, that is to fetch employee by employee ID. Okay, so please select this one, click here in the employee. Okay, then we'll select this one. Then again we need to create a resource to fetch employee by employee ID. So we have the endpoint like employee/employee ID. Okay, so here I can provide employee ID as a path parameter. Clear? So employee ID as a path parameter. So this is my resource. Then what else? Then what will be my endpoint looks like? /employee/employee ID. So this is my what? This is my resource path. So whenever the client send a request /employee/employee ID, then this fetch employee by employee ID method will be executed. Okay, that's why my resource name is employee ID, and employee/employee ID is nothing but my what? Nothing but my resource path or endpoint. So again, I'll select this one, enable API gateway course. Okay, so like this way we can provide the path param to our API gateway. Okay, then click here to create your second request to fetch employee by employee ID. Clear so far? Okay, so our employee by employee ID resource is created. Again, this is a get method type. So I'll click this one and create a method. So create method. So the method type is what? Get. Let me click here. Then this is my employee/employee ID. Okay. So now the integration type is Lambda function, because whenever a request comes to this API gateway, our Lambda will be invoked. So integration type is Lambda function. Then use Lambda process integration for this as well. Then choose the Lambda REST API Lambda. Okay. Then save it. Okay. Add permission to Lambda. Save it. Clear? So now our second resource is created successfully. That is nothing but employee by employee ID. What else? Now we have to fetch all the employees. So that is employee/employees. Okay, to fetch all the employee list from our DynamoDB table. So we need to create another resource for it. Clear? So let's create another resource inside this employee. So click here, create resource. So let me give the resource name like employees. Okay, then my resource endpoint is like employee/employees. So this is nothing but to fetch all the employees from the employee database. So enable CRUD here, create resource. Okay, employees resource created successfully. Now we'll create method for this. So what is the method? Of course, get. Okay, so click here, create method, select get, method type is get, click here in the tick mark. So integration type is Lambda, use Lambda proxy integration. Then I'll provide the function name, which is REST API Lambda. Okay, then click here to save your Lambda. Add permission to Lambda function. So click here to create your third resource, that is nothing but to fetch all the employees from the employee database. So now 3 resources we have created so far. So now I'll create the last one. So last one is to delete a particular employee by employee ID. So for this also we have employee/employee ID. So we'll provide the employee ID as a path parameter. So we have already created a resource. See here, employee/employee ID. So here we have created a get method. So we can create a delete method as well. So just select this resource, click here in the action, create method, then click here to delete method. Click here in the tick mark. So see, so delete also created inside this /employee ID resource. So integration type is Lambda function, then use Lambda proxy integration, then select the Lambda here, REST API Lambda, then click here to save this method as well. Add permission to Lambda function. Okay, So now we have successfully created our all 4 resources. That is to save employee, to fetch employee by ID, to fetch all the employee list, and to delete a particular employee. So clear so far how we can create resources and methods in AWS API Gateway. Okay. So now the last point remaining is we need to deploy these resources. So select this one, employee. Click here in the action, and here you can see API action, deploy API. So click here to deploy your first API. So deployment stage. So we have not created any stage yet. So we'll go with the new stage. So you have to provide your stage name. Whether you are going to deploy this API to your dev environment, prod environment, or any QA environment. So accordingly you can choose. Okay, you can deploy your API. So now I am going to deploy this, let's say, dev environment. So I'll give my stage name as dev. So description and deployment description I don't want to provide it. If you want, you can give any text here. So click here to deploy this API. Clear? So our stage is created for our API gateway. So here you can see there, if I expand this one, you can see all the resources are present. Employee post is there, employee by ID is there, delete and get method is there. Okay, / employees is also there. Okay, so let me open this post method. So here you can see your invoke URL. So you can use this endpoint for post request. Okay, so this is the API gateway ID, then region, then dev is your stage name, then / employee is your nothing but your resource path. So this is nothing but to save your employee. Then likewise, if I click here in the get method, you can see this one, employee / employee ID. This is to fetch a particular employee by ID. Then we have the delete method. I can click here. See, the URL is same, but the method type is what? Delete. Okay. Then to fetch all employees, we have this get employee / employees. Okay. So you can use this method. You can use this endpoint to test your REST API. Understood so far? Okay. So far we have discussed how we can create a DynamoDB table, how we can create Lambda function, and how we can create an IAM rule and assign to this Lambda function. And also we know how we can create resources and methods in the API gateway. Also we have deployed this API gateway. Clear so far? And also we got our endpoints to hit from the postman and to test our Lambda code. Okay. So that's it for this video, guys. So we learn how to create all our resources. Now we are ready with our resources. So in my next video, I'll show you how we can write our Java code, okay, to create our CRUD endpoints by using Lambda function, and we'll deploy that Lambda function to our AWS Lambda here and test all our API endpoints and see how it works. So hope you like this video. See you in my next video. Thanks for watching. Thank you.